So we are here to talk about difficult situations, difficult people. So I thought I would start with a story. And I was thinking about, who is the most difficult person that I've had to deal with at work? And don't worry, Shu, it's not you. Because Shu and I have worked together for a long time. She's easy to work with. So what I was thinking about was an example of a time in my life that was really difficult because I hired a new person to the team, and they were in a very senior professional role. Hey, Ian, I can see you've joined. This person I had, I was really impressed with during the interview process. It was actually quite a long interview process. But what soon became apparent was that he and I just did not see eye to eye on things. And we would have conversations that ended up in very heated discussions where I would raise my voice, he would raise his voice. And I think we were kind of both shocked about that. And we would, I would get to the point where I would be, as a leader, doing things that I never do, which is basically saying to him, just do it my way. You have to do it my way. And which I never do, because I always sort of pride myself in being a very, very much a participative, inclusive leader. And I really like to empower the people I work with. So I remember walking away from those conversations, shocked at my own behavior, shocked at his behavior. And then we would come back the next day, and I would, sit him down, and we would be, less angry and emotional. And I would apologize for my behavior. He would apologize for his behavior. And we would lay out some expectations for how we're going to work with each other going forward. And then it would happen again. And so I kept thinking, what is going on here? So that's the kind of thing that I want to talk about today, is give you some tips for how to manage that kind of situation. But some of you might be here because you're thinking about other kinds of difficult people or conversations. And all of that, all of those situations are applicable to kind of what I'm going to say. Because I'm going to give you basically 5 areas that you can concentrate on to get yourself out of this spiral of being shocked and maybe behaving in ways that you don't like about yourself, and also being on the receiving end of behavior that you don't like. So that's the aim today, is to kind of get us feeling a bit more confident to deal with difficult emotions, difficult conversations, and basically difficult people. Okay, so let's just go. I'm going to share my screen because I've got some ways, just some words that might help us to anchor the conversation. So let me just do that now, and then we'll go from there. Okay. Oh, you know what? I might not share my screen because it's not allowing me to do that. That's all right. Yeah, okay, I've got a bit of a problem. Look, no problem. I'm going to give you lots of resources. So I'll just keep going and through the discussion today, and then I'll give you some resources at the end. You don't need to see the screens. It would have been nice, but hey, you get me instead, so it's all right. Okay, so there are 5 areas that I'm going to cover. The first one is know what's motivating the behavior. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to talk about how to adapt your communication style. Because once you kind of understand what's motivating the other person, you can adapt your communication style, just really sort of help that situation. Then we're going to talk about what you need to know about yourself to help you regulate emotions, especially when emotions are heightened and you're dealing with someone that, like I said, surprises you. We're going to talk about setting boundaries, because boundaries and expectations are part of the reason why we end up in conflict, because there's usually a misalignment across those areas. And then lastly, we're going to talk about leadership. So how you front up as a leader. And even if you're not leading a team, this will apply to you, because we are leaders every time we're in a social situation. You can always take the leadership perspective. You can always lead others through modeling good behavior and good responses. So let me start with the first one, knowing what's motivating behavior. So luckily, there are only 3 things that most of the people on the planet are motivated by. The first one is autonomy, a sense of autonomy, or the degrees in which people enjoy autonomy. The second one is belonging, the feeling we get when we belong to a group or even a larger cause. For example, a social connection that we feel when we have the same kind of aims in relation to, it could be the community or it could be the planet, for example. So belonging doesn't have to be just us belonging to a certain group, but it can be belonging to a larger aim, a larger set of people or groups. And the last one, number 3, is competency. So the degree to which we enjoy mastering certain situations. So those 3 things are A, B, and C. Autonomy, belonging, and competency. Everyone on the planet will be motivated to a certain degree by one or more of those things. And often when you think about it yourself, think about what motivates you more. Is it a sense of autonomy where you can do it your way and you get energy from developing a plan that's just for you, or maybe doing things in a different way, thinking outside the box? That can be very motivating for you. That usually goes to your sense of identity in terms of who you are as a person, your sense of uniqueness. So a lot of people are very motivated by that. Or it could be that you're more motivated by the sense of social connection that you feel with others. You're more energized when you feel like you're working with others or working in harmony with the people around you, or you have a goal that, others share and you're all working together. That sense of teamwork or social connection, affiliation with other people can be what motivates you. And the third thing in terms of mastery, it could be, sorry, I just saw the comments. Yes, Ian, the other C is chocolate. I won't even go there. The other thing about mastery is, think about all of the thousands and even millions of hours that people on the planet put into mastering tasks, mastering things that they may never really get a return on investment around. So for example, you might spend hours and hours learning a musical instrument, but it's not that the sense of fulfillment you get from that, or motivation you get from that, it's not because you want to be a rock star. It's just because you see yourself getting better and better at something. So for some people, competency is really important. Now, going back to my difficult employee, I realized that for him, competency was super important. He came from a particular cultural background too, and his experience where knowledge in his background was where you rated people from a social perspective. And we talked about this because I said to him, you seem to be really fixated on being right. I even said to him, you seem to be fixated on almost being the smartest person in the room all the time, which means you're not listening to other people's input often. And he said, you're right, because where I come from, in my background, if you're not the smartest person in the room, you don't rate from a sort of social pecking order. So for him in particular, that was super important. It was really important to get a sense of that. Okay, so then once you actually understand what's motivating people, then you can have a better understanding of perhaps listening as to what they need. So you can go back and you can ask people, what was that conversation really about for you? What is it that you're not getting here in this situation? Because people often react quite emotionally when their need isn't being met. So for example, if you are dealing with someone who has a strong need for belonging, they have a strong affiliation need. If that need isn't being met, they're more likely to feel rejected and isolated. So their emotional reaction to you could be that anger or frustration if that need isn't being met. And for example, this can work out in the workplace when, as a team, there are certain expectations of someone who's very high on this need, not having their needs met as a team. They might feel isolated by the team. And this could be totally just in their heads. It may not be what's really happening, but because their need is so high, they might not be getting the social cues that particularly they need. I'm just looking at Ian's questions. No. So Ian just asked the question, are A, B, and C just motivations we bring to work? No, these are universal motivations. Universal motivations across different situations, and actually the research shows us they are pretty true across cultures. So that's kind of what the research shows us. If you want to know more about that, Daniel Pink has some really great books. One of them is called Drive, and he explains the research in a really easy way. So, and I love this motivational model because it's easy for me to remember. All I need to remember is A, B, and C. Okay. So let me go to the next issue that I see a lot, and that's in terms of adapting your behavior. So different personality styles require different communication. So, and there are mainly five different personality styles. And again, there's been a bit of cross-cultural research done which shows that in most cultures this seems to be true as well. The first personality style is people's preferences around their ability to be open to experience. So some people will be very inventive and curious, whereas others will be more on the scale of being more cautious but consistent. So their openness to experience will determine how they perhaps like to be communicated to or what they find important. The next personality type, if you like, or set of preferences is the degree to which people will be conscientious. So you've got people that on one side of the scale, very efficient and organized, and they value that. And on the other side of the scale, they're more easygoing and maybe a little bit careless and reckless. And this plays out a lot in communication because if you're dealing with someone who is more on the conscientious side, they're going to value detail in the conversation. They're going to value structure in the conversation. So they may have expectations from you that you need to provide them with a bit of a plan, with a sequence. And if you're if you're more informal and easygoing, you might miss that. That might be a cue that you miss. The other personality type is extroversion, introversion, which we kind of, most people know about. Extroversion is the preference for, being in social situations, and perhaps people who are more extroverted tend to be more outgoing and energetic. People who are more introverted, it's not that they're not energetic, it's just that they receive their energy from being on their own. So they actually have less tolerance for environmental stimuli. So if you're dealing with someone who's perhaps different to you, say me, I'm an extrovert. I'm actually about 99% on the extroversion scale, and I've measured it. When I'm dealing with people who are introverted, I need to adapt my communication, bring everything down a level and slow down the conversation and really use my cues from the other person in terms of the level of introspection that they need, or the level of detail in the conversation that they need, or even just the extent to which we have conversations in chunks, for example. The other personality type is neuroticism, and that sounds negative, but it's not really. Neuroticism is really our propensity and sensitivity to external stimulus. So some people are just more sensitive than others. Some people are more likely to react to things in a more anxious way, a nervous way, whereas others are more likely to be secure and confident in their space. it's not negative or positive, it's just your sensitivity to the environment. So while extroversion and introversion is a dimension that's related to the number of social situations that you can kind of handle and where you get your energy from, this neuroticism is more related to the thinking patterns you have when you're dealing with an environment. So if you're dealing with someone who's perhaps more sensitive than you, or more likely to be more highly aware of their environment and therefore be reacting in a less secure way, then what you need to do is perhaps provide more reassurance in your communication and ask them more about those feelings that they're having. So an easy way to remember that is there's an acronym called OCEAN, which is openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Oh, actually, I forgot about agreeableness. I left one off. See, my OCEAN reminded me. Agreeableness is just the way in which our preferences are related to whether we are friendly and compassionate versus challenging and detached. And this is actually often attributed to the importance we put on being liked as well. So you might be dealing with someone who is very high on that friendly, compassionate end, but you yourself perhaps might have expectations that people should be challenging and should be a little bit more immersed in what they're doing from an objective point of view and not such a personal point of view. So you can actually be very turned off if someone comes at you in that kind of overly friendly way if you're on the other side of the spectrum. So there's a continuum with personality. Personality isn't fixed. We have preferences, and from time to time in different situations, some preferences will be more heightened than others. So think about it. Think about the person in front of you. What is their personality type? Are they introverted, extroverted, verted? What's their openness to experience like? What kind of conscientiousness do they have? How agreeable are they in their set of preferences? And also, is there a level of sensitivity there that you've really got to accommodate in your communication style? Okay, so we're up to number 3 now. The third tip, know yourself. So that's a tricky one, isn't it? Because often when we're in a heated conversation or when we're in a situation, we're surprised. And the reason we're surprised is because we react to what's in front of us. And there's unconscious thinking. Okay. So thanks, Ian. Ian asked a question. Let me answer that question. So does OCEAN fit in with the new understandings about neurodiversity? And I think it does, Ian, in terms of those not being personality types, they are preferences and traits. So they're not, so what I'm deliberately not using personality types, because personality types tend to categorize us as one thing or the other. And of course, there will be different cultural situations and lots of situations that relate to the social environment that we've been not only raised in, but we're experiencing today. So, but there are certain shortcuts to our preferences. We do learn preferences really young in our development, and there are shortcuts to our preferences where we tend to overlay our expectations on the set of preferences that we have. I don't know if that's answered your question. Maybe if you've got some information you want to share afterwards, we can have a chat about it. Okay, so going to knowing yourself. Between reacting to something with a feeling, between experiencing something and reacting to something with a feeling, there is a little space in time for a thought. And what happens is, so I'll go back to my employee. When he started, he would get, from my interpretation, we would be having a discussion about a certain topic. He would get very fixed on his point of view. So from his point of view, there was truth in what he was saying. And I'm more flexible and open to experiences. So I wasn't as fixed and consistent in the way I think about things. So when he would get like that, he would get very determined and start to maybe raise his voice a little bit because he was passionate about what he was saying. And I would get triggered because it would trigger my sense of autonomy in terms of, well, how dare you tell me that what you're saying is true and that I can't contribute to that thought? And also, I'm your leader. We should be having a conversation about this. Why are you, not willing to receive inputs from me and others? So I would get triggered in that because the thought that I would have is, he's being stubborn, and I have this reaction to people that are stubborn because I have preferences around being open to experience. I believe that's the way to live life. That's the way to think. For me, that's a preference. And I see it, when I see the other side, I think of people who are, opposite to that, which is closed. And I get triggered by that. I also get triggered because I also have a need for competency and mastery. So when he is very fixed in his view, I suddenly get into an identity thought that says, he thinks I'm an idiot. He thinks I have nothing to contribute here. He thinks that what I know is not valid. And that triggers my sense of competency because I've worked very hard to be a competent professional, and it's important to me. So those needs and expectations are flying from me, and then I react by getting really pissed off. Now, I don't know what's going on for him, but the same complex cycle of being met by stimulus and reacting with thoughts in between would be happening to him on his end. So then what happens is that we end up in a very difficult situation because there's a conversation happening down here that none of us are aware of. I'm not necessarily aware of the needs that I have that aren't being met. I'm not necessarily aware of the triggers that I have that are currently being triggered. He might not be aware either. So the best thing you can do to help yourself regulate in those situations, and you will do this through reflection after it happens. So think about those conversations you've had that haven't gone well, and think about what need has been perhaps triggered for you, or perhaps what thought has come in between the stimulus, in other words, something coming at you, and the way you reacted. So a way to do that is to observe yourself as if you were sitting, on the roof of a 50-story building, and you were watching yourself down on the floor, reacting in the way you reacted. Try to get an objective distance between you and the kind of analysis you want to do, and really ask yourself, what was it that I was thinking before I had that emotional reaction? Why is that important to me? Why was I triggered like that? Why did I interpret that conversation in that way? I'm just looking at comments here. Yes. Okay, so if you're responding, that's a really good question, Shu, because you can say, well, I'm super self-aware. What about that person? Like, I can think of that employee. He actually wasn't very self-aware. But then actually, as we took a number of months to have these discussions, he got more self-aware. So how do you deal with it? Okay, so if you are self-aware, immediately your ability to stop yourself from reacting emotionally in the way that you're not happy with is going to be increased. So that's one thing. You can't control someone else's reactions, but all you can do is control your own reactions and the way you feel and think about something. So even though you're dealing with someone who is not self-aware, you can control your own reactions. So the heightened self-awareness that you bring in might, for example, help diffuse a situation because you might calm it down. So for example, you might see something come at you and you say, normally that would anger me, but I'm not going to get angry. I'm going to be more curious. This is where you start to lean into a conversation, and you start to rather than react, you say, tell me about that. Tell me why that's important to you. Tell me about a situation where you saw that happening. Tell me about the consequences of that for you. So you start to lean in and listen to the other person rather than reacting yourself. And when you start to take that approach, that other person then hopefully starts to calm down and start answering, because then they're feeling like they're being heard. And, listening to each other is such an important part of diffusing conflict and really trying to understand each other. So that leaning in is really important. You might also use that technique after you've had a conversation that didn't go well and you've had a time to reflect on it, and you can come back and you can say, you know what, that conversation didn't go well. Yes, curiosity issue is the way to go. Yeah, be more curious. And you can use this as feedback. You can say, you know what, yesterday you said this, I interpreted it this way, and that's why I reacted that way. And you can apologize for your behavior if that's appropriate. And you can say, in the future, I'd like to not react that way. And what I need is to have a conversation, perhaps that's more about, what you meant. What was your intention? So the other important part of leaning into conversations, even after difficult conversations have happened, as a feedback technique, is to look at what was the intent. Most people don't intend to piss me off. Most employees don't intend to make their bosses angry. Most employees don't want that outcome. So if I can go back and say, you know what, when this happened, this was the impact on me, then I'm also giving them an insight into me. And that requires me to be more vulnerable. I need to share that. So self-awareness is also about your ability to share those vulnerabilities with each other. To be vulnerable is really an important leadership skill. And we often miss that, because a lot of the stereotypes about leaders and leadership is actually to be strong, to make decisions, to make sure that you have a direction that others can follow. And it's actually very far from the truth. Most of the most impactful leaders are often those leaders that know how to show vulnerability when it's appropriate. And they also know how to, direct when that's appropriate too. So it's really important. I'm just going to pause a little bit, just if there's any other questions around that, and then I'll keep going. By the way, while I pause, I don't know, this will probably come out opposite on the screen, but this is a book. I'm going to put all of these books in the comments. This is a book that I love. It's Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen, called Difficult Conversations. It helps you unpack what are some of the things that are underneath conversations. And I love this because they give you 3 types of conversations and how to analyze them. And they very well match up with the 3 things that motivate people. So I will give you a link to this. And they also wrote a second book on thanks for the feedback. So it's a book on how to give and receive feedback, which is important. It's another part. If we had more time, I'd talk about feedback as well, because that's important. All right, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to keep going. Oh, it's not opposite on the screen. Oh, great. Okay. So this is the book. And what I'll do is I will put a link in the comments. This is a fantastic book. I love it. I love it. Okay. So we're up to number 4. Number 4, set boundaries. We are often disappointed in ourselves because often we say yes when we should say no. Often we take on too much when really someone else could have done it. So everyone that has trouble delegating on this call, it's because you're not setting boundaries for yourself. You take on too much. And And setting boundaries is actually about being accountable to ourselves and what we need, and really owning that and being kind to ourselves. And it's about letting go of the things that we want to control. Because often if you can't set boundaries, it's because you're trying to control everything in your environment instead of asking for help. Because setting boundaries is about asking for help. I'll give you a really good example about how to, that will lead me into talking about setting boundaries. So, for example, someone says to you, hey, Shu, can you get this done by Friday? And you know this week, it's actually a really busy week for you. And on top of that, you've got some family commitments. And you want to say, yes, I can get it done by Friday, because you have a preference for, being agreeable. You have a preference for showing that you're competent. All of those needs and personalities come into play. This is hypothetical, by the way. I don't really know that about Shu. So what you say is, you might say, yes, I'll get it done by Friday. And then you walk away and you feel resentment, you feel disappointment, you know that the week is going to be difficult now. You might need to cancel something that was related to family, so you feel resentment again. All of that can be avoided by saying no. But what you want to do is say no in a positive way. And what I mean by saying no in a positive way is you need to communicate. Again, it's being more open about what you communicate about yourself. You need to communicate what you care about in the way that you say no. So when you say no without a context, people might interpret that as you not being helpful, or that you're not as agreeable as someone else, or that you're, they could interpret lots of things. But if you say no by adding, you know what, I would love to get that done for you by Friday, because I'm really passionate about this work and I love working with you, and you're on the top of my priority list. But you know what, this week, I've got a lot of other things going on that I've made commitments to others about, and I value the commitments I make, like I value the commitments I make to you. So I won't be able to do it by Friday, but could we have a conversation about when the next earliest time could be, so that I can help you out? So what that is saying no, but you've said it with a yes. And I'll show you what the no, yes, no, I want to show you a framework, which is no, yes, no. The no response is, I can't do that for you. Actually, sorry, let me change that around. Let me go yes, no, yes. So I'm gonna show you that again. Yes, no, yes. Okay, so the yes response is, I love this work. I really want to do it. I love working with you. The no response is, but I can't get this done by Friday. The yes response is, the reason I can't get this done by Friday is because of the commitments I have to others. And tell them something about you. I'm actually someone who keeps my commitments. So I want to keep my commitment to you too. How can we do this in a different way so I can keep my commitment to you? So you can see how that is suddenly, that no is covered with all this positivity. For any one of you on the call who has trouble saying no, think about that. Think about covering your no with lots of yeses. And again, I'm going to give you a book, which is this guy. I love this guy, William Ury from the Harvard School, The Power of Positive No. I've been coaching and mentoring people for decades, and I always refer this book. It's one of those books I keep buying because it comes off my shelf really quickly. So this is something, if you have trouble saying no, this is what you need. You need a framework. The reason is we have trouble saying no and setting boundaries because we are often taught to say yes, but we are not taught how to say no. So that's it. there's a lot more there, but I won't have time to cover. There will be a blog that I'll share with you that goes into a little bit more detail about that. Lastly, sharing leadership. So leaders are the people we often have the most expectations about. I keep thinking about Dan Andrews here, and regardless of what your view is of the current state that the Dan Andrews government is responding to and their plan, etc., who would want to be in his shoes right now? It's a really tough call to be in leadership, because often you have the expectations of very different people, and you're trying to kind of get a happy medium, or you're really what you're trying to do is achieve certain aims through your leadership. Sorry, I'm just looking at the comments. Challenge is to be assertive, but also communicate authentically. Yes, Ian, that's right. This is for the how to say no. So sharing the leadership is important. And if you're a leader and you lead a team, you need to ask yourself this question: how often do you empower others to pick up that leadership role? How often do you also, if you have a boss and you're not the leader, or you're working with people who are in a hierarchy to you and are in leadership teams, how often do you ask them what they need in terms of what they need to support their leadership role? Leadership should be shared or distributed in order to meet that need of belonging and autonomy. People like to do things their own way from time to time, but they also like to feel like they are on board with a collective mission. So if you've got a particular goal, you're trying to achieve something, it could be that what's getting in the way of that is that you're not sharing the leadership role. And by doing that, some really easy examples of that are, as a leader, are you the one always setting up the conversations? Are you the one always setting up the meetings? Are you the one always chairing, the particular discussion? Are you the one saying, I'll take that on, I'll take on getting back to that client? Could you ask others to communicate for you, or could communicate for the organization? What are the things you're doing as a leader that you could share with others? Are there any projects, particularly strategic projects, that you could put your employees in charge of? That's important. That'll give them a sense of really having a stake in the company without, and you can guide and direct them. So shared leadership is actually one of those things that we often, again, don't think about as strong leadership, but good leaders, as I said, have to be situational. They have to adapt according to different situations. And more, particularly, if you look at any of the research on the generations, and look, some of that is a bit waffly, but if you look at Generation Y and Z, they in particular need shared leadership models. Younger people are not as empowered and motivated when they're confronted with a kind of a directive style of leadership or a more hierarchical style of leadership. So you need to provide spaces for people to actually boss it like you do. I always say in business, attract people around you and empower them to boss it like you do. Again, you need to allow them to make mistakes, because you need to let go of some things. So start off small. What are some things they could just be responsible for? Provide a space where failure is acceptable, because people will learn from their mistakes. One of the worst things that I could do as a mentor is give you a blow-by-blow or step-by-step instruction on how to do something, because then that takes your autonomy away. It takes your sense of confidence away. What I should be doing is asking you, how would you do that? How do you want to do that? What are the ideas that you have? What are the ways in which you can ask other people for their ideas? The more I empower you, the more the ideas come from you, the less you're going to rely on me as a leader. So what you want to do in business is make sure that all of your employees have a sense that they own the company, that they are like the boss. If you're not getting that, then you need to ask yourself, maybe you're not letting go of enough. And I get it, it's a risk, because letting go of certain aspects of the business means that they might not do it like you do it. They might make mistakes. So provide safe ways to transition people into that. But you know what? You might be surprised, because after those 2 steps, they may end up doing it better than you do. And that's what you want. You want people in your company to be doing it better than you do, because none of it can rest all in our heads. Why am I including that as part of a discussion on difficult people? Because often issues of performance management, issues of motivation, issues where you're seeing your staff just aren't doing the work you want them to do, can actually be about this. It can be because they don't have a stake, and you haven't given them enough of a stake in the business. You haven't given them enough of a stake in the outcome. So they are just what they do. When those motivations aren't being met, you don't get the full potential of capability. People kind of go through the motions. They do just enough to kind of, meet your expectations at the minimal level, but they'll never exceed them. They'll never go above and beyond. They'll never surprise you by being proactive in a way that you want them to be proactive. So if you're talking about your staff or your partners or your suppliers in ways where you're saying, that they're just not owning it, it's probably because you're not letting it go. Okay, so Ian, you've got a comment there. Wouldn't want to sound too Californian and cheesy. Is that related to the yes, no, yes? And or the shared leadership? I'm just checking. And look, that's where I'm going to stop, guys. So if you've got any other questions, please let me know. As I said, there's a blog on this. I'll give you the slides that I was going to share. I'll give them to you too, just so you can remember. And if there's anything you want to have a chat about in relation to anything we've talked about, that's what I'm here for as well. So we can always do a one-on-one where we can work through a situation that you're having, or maybe envisaging that you're going to have a situation. And I'm really happy to help you get to that level of self-awareness and put some strategies in place so that difficult situation doesn't stay difficult. So thanks everybody. I will stay on and just answer any comments as we go along, and really happy to have the conversation, and we'll talk soon. Okay, bye.